cause I thrive, I might just blow your mind tonight. I'm so hyped, but it's no hype. From this height, it's direct hits on sight. I'm your type, lend me your ears to show you that there's something in me. I'm not giving up, I'm standing right here, holding these days hostage, and I'll make this my year. We turning fear into love, and the love's in the air. I love doing this cause nothing compares, nothing can share that same type of feeling when you feeling them flares. They can't catch it, it's havoc, I rip to a tear. Switch the scenario, my stereos, I leave them impaired. Variables start to change and they're all in my range. I just gotta grab it, it's all mathematics. Every step is drastic, I make it fantastic. I'm trying to take your breath away, asthmatic.
This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo. This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo.
Yeah, just nod your head with it, so explicit and vivid. Every image is intricate, intimate. I put my all into it, no scrimmage and no rules. I'm a pro tool, hear my heartbeat, beat into the vocals. I'm so loco, lost my mind, oh no. It's ponderoso, dope, so no overdose, cause it's dope, yo. Man, this is house grown, mixed with some milestones. So I let the style flow down like the Dow Jones, bringing it with some foul tones, letting the crowd know we getting loud, so it's eardrum rudiments. Yeah, we bring it rude again. Move, little hooligan. Music for tuning in, full time to the 10. I'm on my clock like I told you. I'm doing this for dreams we pursuing.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Anti-Media Radio Show. Once again with your host, Nick Bernabe, here on UCY.tv. Thank you all for joining us back and really having alive and living in this crazy, dangerous time. I mean, so many things going on in the world, and where to start? We've got a lot of stuff to cover tonight. We're going to be joined by an awesome panel, and we're going to be talking about a bunch of geopolitical stuff. The election front. I don't know if anybody bothered watching that vice presidential debate, but I heard it was a big waste of time. But I guess we could talk about that if you guys want to talk about that. We're going to be taking calls as well. If anybody wants to call in, we have just a couple ground rules. If you get on the line by calling into our phone number, then just mute your microphone, and then we'll let you, we'll announce your area code, and then that's your cue to start talking, and you can start talking with us. If you're calling in just to listen to the show, please don't do that. Go to theantimedia.org/radio or ucy.tv. And you can listen to the show live there, and you could call in if you feel like calling in. The call-in number is 718-717-8296. Those of us that have been doing this show for a long time, and all of our listeners that have been listening, I don't want to say anything goes when you call in, but we can talk about all kinds of different stuff. Sometimes we want to stay on topic though, and we'll let you know about that. And just try to refrain from dropping the F-bomb as much as you can. We try to refrain from it as well, but sometimes it slips. But anyway, that being said, let me introduce our panel, because we've got a complete panel tonight. My longtime co-host on the line, DB Schwartz. What's up, man?
Hey, man. Just trying to get this timeline established in my mind for what's going on as far as over in Syria. And I had a buddy of mine who's in the Marines today. He basically let me know he's going to go back into action, and he hasn't been into action in like 15 years. So they're calling up basically everybody and telling them to get ready, and they don't do that on a whim.
Yeah, the tensions in Syria right now are just through the roof, and that's probably the single greatest issue facing the United States and much of the world right now is what's going on in Syria, because as we've been talking about for a couple years now, this whole thing kicked off back during the Arab Spring, back in like 2011, but there was a bunch of stuff going on before that as far as kind of laying the groundwork for revolutions over there in the Middle East. The United States sprang into action in the Arab Spring. We kind of, in countries that we weren't friendly with, like in Libya and Syria and places like that, we went and we said, hey, you guys can't bomb your people, you can't kill your people, you can't jail activists, you can't do bad things to protesters. And so we went and we started undermining those countries with, arms, with propaganda, with propping up the opposition. And then on the other hand, in the Arab Spring, countries that were our friends, like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, when they started doing that kind of stuff, the same type of things that Muammar Gaddafi did, the same type of stuff that Bashar al-Assad did, as far as trying to oppress protesters and shut down protests and arrest activists and things like that, we sold them weapons to do it. We looked the other way. We didn't even criticize them. We let them do it, And so the first thing to get out of the way here is that the United States is not doing any kind of humanitarian mission over in Syria, and that's the big sale right now. That's what's going on in the mainstream media. It's Iraq 2.0. It's Libya 2.0. It's hey, are we gonna stand around while Russia blows people up in Syria when the United States should go over there and save people and straighten out the situation and make it all better? That's the narrative that's being sold right now in the mainstream media. But unfortunately, I wish that were true. I wish the United States would go over there and say, you know what, Saudi Arabia, we're tired of you guys jailing activists. We're not going to let you do that anymore. But we don't, because we don't care about that. We actually really don't care about human rights and that kind of thing, because if we did, we wouldn't be allies with Saudi Arabia. We wouldn't be allies with Israel. We wouldn't be allying ourselves with a bunch of repressive dictatorships and regimes all around the world if we actually cared about human rights. So, the new thing to do, back in the day, we used to go around the world and we'd fight communism, and that was like under the guise of fighting communism, we justified our wars all around the world, whether it's in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Korea, or down in South America, Nicaragua, Guatemala, and all the places that we did our business down there. It was to fight communism. But now if it's not to fight terrorism, it's to protect civilians and to spread democracy. All it is just a change of words. But what we're doing really is just continuous, perpetual empire building, protecting the vast empire that we've built up, and grabbing resources, making countries fall under our sphere of influence, making them pay, making them do what we say and stuff like that. It's just kind of Empire 2.0, where they've changed up the words and stuff, but it's really just the same thing that empires have been doing for thousands and thousands of years. And so that's the number one thing to get out of the way here, is that we can't fall back into this narrative that got us into the Iraq War in 2003, where it was like, oh, the regime is dangerous. It's going to do this, it's going to do that. The first time we went into Iraq back in the 90s, they were saying that the regime was throwing babies out of incubators and stuff. That wound out, it turned out that was not true, and it turned out in 2003 that Iraq didn't have the weapons of mass destructions or anything like that, and so we got to be very, very skeptical of the media coverage, because what they're doing essentially, what the media is doing is regurgitating the State Department, press releases, and so in that way, the U.S. mainstream media is basically acting as a de facto state-run media for the U.S. government, and so we have to be very, very skeptical about what they say, just as we have to be skeptical about what RT and Sputnik and what the Russian government is saying, because here's the thing that we have to get out of the way as well, and this is where a lot of people think that just because, everyone that listens to this show knows that the U.S. is an empire that's doing a lot of evil deeds around the world in many ways for corporate profits and for other nefarious means. But because of that, people tend to think, well, Putin is a good guy. Putin's like, the superhero and stuff. Putin is not a superhero. Putin is a bad guy too. And so the issue here, and we kind of talked about this at the end of the show last week, is that while the United States government and what our government is doing, it's our responsibility as people living in the U.S. and people that consider themselves Americans or U.S. citizens. The U.S. government is our responsibility to gain control of it and don't let them turn what is quickly evolving into a World War III scenario over there in Syria, while at the same time, it's also up to people from Russia to get a hold of their government, people from China to get a hold of their government, people in England and Europe and everywhere else. This isn't something where we can just say, okay, the people in the U.S. understand what's going on now, we're not going to let it happen. Everyone all around the world, man, it needs to be a global awakening of just technology and political consciousness that comes to the realization that we don't need wars anymore. We don't. And that's really where we're at, because if we don't, I mean, even if the U.S. stops being the dominant empire around the world, someone else is going to fill the vacuum. And so what we really need is like this global conscious awakening that is really rejecting this idea of war and corporatism and empire building and all these other nefarious crony capitalism and all that stuff. I don't know. I mean, it's a really big topic, but those are just my thoughts on it. Let me introduce our other co-panelist, Jake Anderson. What's up, man? How you doing tonight?
I'm good, man. I agree with what you're saying. Well, somewhere along the line here, we need the revolution has to be a transformation in consciousness. I agree with that.
Yeah, because if not, I mean, think about it right now, and this is a scenario I want to run by both of you guys, is looking at the state of the United States right now, the state of America, right? And the prevailing thought processes, the prevailing political ideas, and the main problem here is that we've devolved to this point where there isn't really a political debate going on in the United States. At least not in the mainstream. Sure, you go over to your buddies' houses and you go hang out and drink beers and smoke joints with your friends, and people have political discussions that are actually meaningful. And I have more like contextual discussions at house parties with people I randomly meet than a lot of times than what I see on CNN or what I see in these political debates. The problem here is in the U.S., the political discussion has devolved so far down to this really kind of caveman sense of left-right, Republican-Democrat ideologies that nothing substantial is ever really talked about. And I think that's one of the huge problems is that the ideas that could actually help us and make a difference just aren't even allowed to be brought into the conversation. And so, what this kind of has us dealing with here is Hillary Clinton, who's going to come in and wants to regime change Syria and put a no-fly zone in. I just heard a general talking about it. Saw a video today from a conference that was going on. Not a conference, it was some kind of hearing. They were talking to this general about what it would take to do a no-fly zone over in Syria, which is what Hillary Clinton has long been advocating, and now I see people in the media kind of parroting that we need to put in a no-fly zone in Syria. A general was just saying in the video I saw today that putting a no-fly zone in Syria means us going to war with not only the Syrian government, but directly with Russia. And so that's really that's one of those things that is so reckless, but it's something that the media throws around lightly as if it's, just another story. Yeah, we got to put a no-fly zone in Russia, no big deal. But or in Syria, sorry, no big deal. But no, it is a really, really big deal. We're talking about two nuclear powers directly fighting each other, and that's not something that should be taken lightly ever, because these people, as we talked about in the last show on Monday, these countries have the capabilities to destroy the entire world for good. With the amount of nuclear weapons they have, thousands and thousands of nuclear warheads that these countries have stockpiled that they could use at any time. To talk about it as if, we just need to go put a no-fly zone and that's going to fix everything, that's going to end ISIS, and no, and that's the other problem here. The problem that we're getting from the Hillary Clinton side of things is that her policies of putting a no-fly zone in Syria. I mean, that's the same thing that we did in Libya, and look what happened. Libya is much, much, much worse off now than it was when we put our hands on it in 2011. When we said, okay, Gaddafi is a bad guy, we need to take out his government, and what are we going to replace it with? Well, we don't really know, and honestly, we don't really care. We just want to knock out his government. That's all we know. And that's what we did. And now the country of Libya, I don't know when that country is ever going to be a country again. It's completely destabilized. It's in the middle of a civil war. There's dozens and dozens of different militant factions fighting each other, fighting for power, a bunch of really complex alliances. ISIS is in Libya now as well. Boko Haram is thriving over there as well. I mean, these are terrible, terrible groups, and we enabled them by toppling their government, under the guise of putting a no-fly zone. Really, what we were doing was toppling the government. Advocating these same ideas in Syria, that's a recipe for disaster. And I mean, if we would have been successful in toppling the Syrian government back in, I think it was in 2013, when the when the war drums were really beating back then, and then there was like a big movement that sprang out, the No War with Syria movement. People were like, the anti-war movement briefly was revived for a couple weeks or a couple months, and the government actually didn't go in and bomb the Syrian government. If that would have happened, I mean, ISIS would have had a country by now. ISIS would have had the whole country, and thank God that didn't happen. And now there's still some semblance of balance over there between the terrorists and the regime, and then the moderates, and it's really hard to see who the moderates are over there. I mean, the Kurds are definitely a good group that's fighting against both the regime and against ISIS. But it's just so complicated for the United States thinking that they can just go in there and just put a no-fly zone and overthrow the government without having unintended consequences. First of all, with Russia, but second of all, just the ramifications of creating a vacuum over there. It's just really, really, really irresponsible policy. And the funny thing is that the media goes around painting Donald Trump as the lunatic, which, don't get me wrong, I agree, but if you ask me, I think Clinton is more insane for thinking that we can just go do this to Syria and not have any kind of repercussions, or maybe they want the repercussions, which makes it even worse.
Nick, did you read that today the USAF scrambled 3 permanently in the air command and control planes? They only put them up there hardened against nuclear attack. They only put them up when they're afraid ground installations and things of that nature will be wiped out. So the government knows what's going on. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a real damper to the election circus as people go into bunkers. I'm not really kidding on that. I mean, they don't put these planes up in the air that run about $200,000 an hour in fuel unless they have to.
Yeah, I saw some reports on that. I didn't get a chance to read into it, and I haven't confirmed it, but I did look into something that you mentioned on Monday about this big nuclear drill going on in Russia, which is something they do kind of on a regular basis, but this is a really huge drill. 40 million Russians are participating in this nuclear drill, and then the Russian government announced that it had enough underground bunkers to house the entire population of Moscow, which is like over 10 million people, I think.
Well, they've had these drills before, Nick, but they've actually never moved 50,000 pieces of material down into the bunkers before. And like I said, there's things being done now that are not done just to be done. They're not drill things. They're things that are far too complex and expensive to be done just for drills.
Yeah, it's getting crazy, dude, and that's why we got to be so urgent with what's going on here. And voting for Trump or Hillary, unfortunately, is just going to make matters worse in equally difficult ways. And going back to this idea, and I want to bring Jake into this about the decay of political conversation in the United States. So on the other end of the spectrum, you got Trump, who his best policy is to build a giant wall and to cut trade deals off around the world and stuff. And it's just and this is what's gaining his support. And so we got this, and then he's pretty much almost equally as hawkish on foreign policy. So you got one guy that's an isolationist in a bad way, and then you got Hillary Clinton on the other end that's a warmongering globalist. And so you got two horribly stale, tried and true, failed political ideologies and ideas clashing with each other as if this is some kind of, and everyone's like, oh, there's a stark difference between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. No, there isn't. There isn't a stark difference. All of their handlers are the same. I mean, look at all the Republicans that are now, the neocons that are voting for Hillary, and, it's it's a big show, man. And you know what? Trump is not going to win. I don't give a shit what anybody says. Trump isn't going to win, and it's just futile for people to be out there going for Trump. And I don't care if you're doing it for whatever reason. If you want to expedite the collapse of the United States, it's not going to happen because Trump isn't going to win. I mean, there's just no way in hell that Trump is going to win. It's very, very obvious that it's going to be Hillary Clinton, and you don't have yet. You know, you have to read a little bit between the lines here. To see the writing on the wall here, but I mean, it's just completely, you know. And there's that old saying, you know, that presidents are selected, not elected, and I think that this election really is very much telling of that, because you know Hillary Clinton, it's very clear she's been the one that is going to be in office. It's been clear for a long time. I mean, look how they treated Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary. If in a political vacuum, there's a chance Bernie Sanders would have been the candidate right now, and he would have been pummeling Donald Trump by like 15 points at this point. But Trump, looking at it from the other side of the spectrum here, from the Republican side, any of those other candidates would have been clobbering Hillary Clinton at this point. Anyone, even Ted Cruz, as awful as that guy was. And Kasich and Ted Cruz and even Jeb Bush would be clobbering Hillary Clinton at this point, because she's just such a horrible, unlikable candidate with so many skeletons in her closet, so much baggage, so much corruption, so many evil deeds and shady dealings and bad foreign policy ethics and just the worst of the worst. Crony capitalism and all of it, all thrown into one. So they went with a guy that the only Republican that could actually lose to Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump. And, you know, looking at his recent comments on veterans and how his words were taken drastically out of context, saying that he thought people with PTSD were weak and that they just weren't able to handle it. That's part of the reason why I'm telling you guys that it's already set up for Hillary Clinton to win. Now, our issue here is not stopping Clinton, because no one's going to stop Clinton, and Trump is just in there to make it seem like you got a choice. But the issue here is changing the hearts and minds of the general public of the United States, because we're not going to elect change. We're not going to vote for someone other than Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, and actually expect them to win. That's not going to happen, at least this election cycle, because there's still such a grip on the voting block, and the voting block is all these people that are like up there above 50, and almost all of them vote, and they all vote right down party lines, and it doesn't matter who's running, they're going to vote for the you know, the party that they have signed up with. The key here is to change the hearts and minds of younger people that actually have minds that haven't been so brainwashed for their entire lives, and they haven't been rotted out by Fox News and MSNBC that they can no longer think for themselves politically. Those are the people that we need to organize with and group together with and fight with and make change with. And we got to do it not politically, not by voting for Clinton or for a Republican or for a Democrat, but by agorism, right? And this is something that I think is so key with the younger generation, and looking at how disillusioned they are. And sure, they were kind of, you know, a lot of young people were hyped up over Bernie Sanders, but that flame got put out as soon as it was lit. You know what I'm saying? That the powers that be were like, oh, no, we can't have this. We can't have young people talking about, you know, anti-establishment socialism and stuff like that, which, in my opinion, is not by any means a great system to be, you know, trying to implement on a national scale, but by all means, it's better than corporate empire building. But you know, what we need to do, I think, is focus more on community activism and community economics, counter economics, black markets, and doing what we can to undermine the state of its lifeblood, which is tax money and corporate money. You know, working against corporations and working against corrupt bureaucratic government at the same time. These are the kind of ways to conduct activism that will actually get the attention of the ruling class, because it'll start drying up their money, and then they're going to have to make reforms. Right now, we can sit from our soapbox and bitch and scream and yell, yeah, Trump's a racist and Clinton's a lying warmonger, all we want. As long as we keep sending money into that machine, they're going to keep spending it. and they're not going to listen to what we have to say because the United States is an oligarchy. It's not, it's not a democracy. It's not a constitutional republic anymore. It's an oligarchy. The ruling class is there. They listen to their buddies that are extremely rich. They do what they want to make their friends rich, and they pretty much ignore us. And every 4 years, they pretend like they're hearing us out. They tell us that they're going to hear us out. They tell us they're going to do what we want them to do, and then they get elected and they revert back. And Obama is like the perfect example. Obama was such a popular guy in 2008. I can't remember a candidate that popular ever. He came in, swept into power with all this revolutionary activist momentum, and then overnight it was like poof, it's gone. And everyone sat back in their chair. And everyone's like, all right, let's just keep paying taxes. Let's just keep shopping at Walmart. Let's just keep voting for Democrats. And what did Obama do? Nothing that he said he was going to do. He went and continued the Bush doctrine. He went and continued bailing out Wall Street, making the inequality gap even worse than it was under Bush. I mean, go ahead, DB.
I was just going to say, man, he actually mission accomplished what Weather Underground tried to start in the 60s and 70s, which is an insurrection of a communist manifesto making its way through the U.S., but under the guise of corporatism. I mean, I don't think people understand. Obama did fundamentally set up the change of this country. The only thing keeping that change from happening is the small arms in the average American's home. Otherwise, we would be right now lining up in bread lines, and there would be no threat of war with Russia because we'd be in the Great Depression, too.
The double Great Recession, right?
Well, I mean, that's what they're setting up, man. They're setting up for all the wealth to funnel up by force. If people don't understand that, perhaps we deserve what will come.
Yeah, and you know what, dude? They've been funneling the wealth upwards for a really long time. I mean, different arguments can be made, but I would say for around 100 years, it started off slowly, and then in the 70s, it accelerated after the Vietnam War and what Nixon did with the monetary system, establishing the petrodollar and stuff. At that point,
but don't blame him, because 1913 is when it really happened. Really what they did was use Nixon as the fall guy, and when they went to a pure fiat system where they didn't even bother to keep gold in Fort Knox anymore. They just said, you know what? If you don't take our dollar, we'll destroy your government. And that was when that policy started. So Nixon gets a bad rap. He was a douchebag for sure, but he did not start the silver standard from being abolished from the dollar. That was 13, man. It was so long ago.
He didn't start it. He just helped finish it off.
Yeah, he put it into legislation, and then we used that as kind of a legal means to not go to war but have conflict forever.
Yeah, and that created the petrodollar, and that is what basically laid the incentive now for this global war on terror, where we go around the world knocking over governments that refuse to deal within our monetary system. And so that's what helped create the problem. But Jake, I want to go back to you, man. I mean, what do you make of the political decay in this country? Because I was watching some old videos. I think the guy was named Gore Vidal. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but back in the day, this guy, which was like this really awesome, like progressive thinker, they used to have like legitimate debates on TV between these like actual philosophers, thinkers from the left and the right, and they would argue out like legitimate philosophies and legitimate policies. And now it's just a shit show. It's just a shit-flinging fest in these debates. And the political discussion has fallen so far from grace that it's not even, like, you get dumber by watching this stuff now at this point. I mean, Jake, what do you think of this, man, and what do you think we should be talking about?
I'm not super familiar with Gore Vidal, but I have watched a couple of debates. They used to have the classic debates between him and William Buckley. William F. Buckley was, infamous conservative jerk off from that time period. But even, I mean, the sad thing is, William F. Buckley, compared to some of the current neocons, I mean, he looks like a socialist compared to the new generation of neocons. But yeah, I don't know what to make. I mean, the rhetoric right now is so it's just, this groupthink is just getting out of control with whatever the state kind of pushes out there. It's immediately parroted by the media, and then even worse, if that wasn't bad enough that our media was doing that, our kind of our friends are doing it too, and they're doing it on social media. And they're taking what they hear on the media, on their mainstream media outlets, and I'm talking Huffington Post, CNN, MSNBC, and of course all of them. And they're taking those points, and they're scared to think past this kind of fog of propaganda. They're scared of kind of really pushing into what's really going on. And so because they have this fear, they latch on to these talking points and start arguing them with the same veracity as the talking head surrogates do. And so they end up becoming, that's why I posted the other day that, if you're going to work for the social media division of Operation Mockingbird, you should at least be getting paid for it. And that seems like what's happening right now is that, an entire generation of liberals, for one, have been conscripted into this complete insane transformation of the Democratic Party into a bunch of neoconservatives. And it's stunning, and it's sad, and I don't know what liberals of the past would make of it, but I'll tell you one thing: they wouldn't be voting for Hillary Clinton, and we're really seeing the dark side of. We've seen the dark side of the lesser of two evils before, but now we truly do have the worst two candidates in history. And so we finally hit rock bottom. The lesser of two evils finally delivered just, the worst candidates either side could have possibly imagined. And we're not going to get out of it. We're going to be stuck with one of these people, and the world is going to continue in this, downward spiral into division and chaos. And I think really the best thing we can do, the best thing any of us can do, is to just start trying to prepare and work on alternative models for how people can organize and communicate with one another on a small scale level, because we're not going to get out of this. There's no exit here in terms of reforming this. There's not any reform for this kind of massive system of crony capitalism. All we can do is, teach our children and teach each other how, almost pretend like we're in an alternate universe. If we were in an alternate universe, how would we act? How would we engage with each other? Would we, what products would we not buy and grow our own food and, agorism and stuff like that? Those are the things we have to work on right now, because we're not going to stop Hillary Clinton. And if Trump's in office, well, we won't stop him either.
Exactly. And the people that are listening, because, here's the thing. Our audience is, we've got a very diverse audience, and we've got a very diverse staff. And from the moment I started the anti-media, I've been kind of mutually anti-establishment against Republicans and Democrats alike, and anyone in between that's an asshole. We in 2012, when we really started getting going on the anti-media, we were really going hard against Mitt Romney and Obama, and just criticizing both of them. And back then I was like, man, these guys are horrible. But this time around, this election, I'm like, this is like, it's like a gift given to us, and it sucks because for us at the anti-media, it's like every day we have more content, some more corrupt shit that Hillary Clinton did, some more fascist shit that Trump said, and we can talk shit about them all day. And for us, it's like, okay, we got content. But for the country, it's bad news, because the state of our country has been deteriorating for a long time, and now this may be the final, what like you said, the two single worst candidates ever. I mean, this may be the final death throw for the two-party system. And there may be some period of growing pains and some rough times, but maybe this will lead to a transformation of the political system in the United States, where the next election, the Republicans and Democrats won't be taken seriously. Maybe that's the case, and maybe the Green Party and the Libertarian Party have a chance to come in and start shaking up the conversation. I mean, the first step, politically speaking, is just to change up the conversation, because right now this shit about voting for Clinton because Trump is a psychopath, or voting for Trump because the media hates him, it makes me want to bang my head against the wall.
And Johnson's not a real alternative either, when he's so pro TPP and so fucking clueless about everything. So you can't. I mean, that's controlled opposition in its own way. I mean, the only group that's not getting any play is Jill, for a reason, the Green Party, because they're anti-war. And honestly, if you're a voter, that's the only issue that should be in your mind. Are you okay with the draft and nuclear exchange with Russia? If you are, sign up for the draft. You go fight, and we'll stay here.
There you go, man. Yeah, I was actually reading an article. A couple articles came out earlier today about Bill Weld, which is the Libertarian Party vice presidential candidate. He's Gary Johnson's running mate. And apparently he made some statements saying that he was pretty much giving up on the election, and he was going to do what he could to defeat Trump. And basically to elect Hillary Clinton. That's basically what he was saying. So I'm not sure if it's. I think Gary Johnson is a genuinely good guy, but I think his running mate is a inside job, and his running mate is the only, because of his running mate, who is this establishment hack, is the reason why they've gotten all this all this media attention and stuff. And for the reason being is that most common knowledge tells you that the Libertarian Party is going to help make Trump lose. But what happened was the opposite happened, and in fact, the Libertarian Party was taking away more support from Hillary Clinton than it was from Donald Trump. And that's why you've been seeing now so many media attacks against Gary Johnson, with his gaffes and with his, forgetting what Aleppo was, and he couldn't name a world leader that he admired. Which on that point, I was like, all right, I can't really name that many, former presidents and stuff that I admire either, or former kings or prime ministers around the world. Honestly, most of them in recent times have been pretty bad, and so on that, I gave him a pass on that. But come on, dude, you got to know what Aleppo is. But the media really, really pounced on him. And, the fact of the matter is, I think 80% of the population of the United States they don't know what Aleppo is either, because I don't know if you guys saw the Google Trends about the search queries and stuff, but the search queries for Aleppo spiked thousands and thousands of percent after Gary Johnson made that gaffe, because nobody else knew what Aleppo was either. It just kind of goes to show how disconnected a lot of people are politically. But thankfully, the people listening to our show tonight, they know what Aleppo is, and we know what Aleppo is, and it's up to us to spread this knowledge out and let people know what the hell is going on, because most people, you don't even have to argue with them that much, because they don't even know what the hell this shit is, and so you could be the first person to tell somebody what's going on in Syria, because they have no fucking clue. And so that's one thing that works to our advantage, is the amount of people that are ignorant. If people that know what the hell is going on are the first ones to inform people what's happening, well, then that's a leg up for us.
Nick, I read today that Russia supplies Europe with 40% of its natural gas for winter heating, and that's what this World War III will end up being about, is to try to cut that out of Russia's economic package, and kind of basically what they want to do is hamstring Russia economically before they actually try the most insane possible thing that you can imagine, which is trying to invade them for their resources. And that's all part of the Project for a New American Century, because remember, they were trying to go in order, but I guess they decided Russia's easier than Iran and China, right?
Yeah, well, China at this point in time is untouchable. Look back in the past and look at what NATO's doing, and people may think that it's crazy to talk about World War III, but I mean, we're long overdue for a big war. We haven't had one in a long time, and I hate to say it, but and I think it can be stopped. But these powers that be like to go to war pretty often, and big wars, not just tinkering around with war on terror, toppling little governments and stuff. That's child's play. Going into Iraq and Afghanistan, Libya, Syria. That's nothing compared to these big giant wars these guys are used to having, World War I, World War II, and things like that.
Nick, unfortunately, Americans are going to come to the horrifying reality, like I have, that we may need to sacrifice this corporation that is masquerading as a country to save the rest of the world. And we all live here, and so do our family and friends. So take from that what you will.
Yeah. And I want to get back into what Jake was talking about, but first I want to address that. But first I want to talk about what's going on in Eastern Europe here, because there's been a massive NATO buildup, and so the NATO, which is basically NATO is basically the empire, and it's been building up all along Russia's borders, man. So talking about an invasion of Russia, it's not that far-fetched to think about. We've been building up militarily around their borders for a long time. And in the past year alone, I mean, it's escalated exponentially. And that's why Russia is acting so erratic right now, because they're scrambling around, because they're like, shit, this is going to be inevitable if we don't do something really soon about it. And that's why there's so much going on with what's happening in Syria and all that, and with the nuclear drill, and Russia just cut ties with the U.S. over Syria. Russia just backed out of a denuclearization agreement with the United States. A lot of things going on over there. And then, we're over there knocking on their doorstep with Ukraine, which many people think was a NATO, like a color revolution, a NATO coup, basically. And, the government of Ukraine switched from a pro-Russian government to a pro-Western government. And, of course, we're over there. We've already sent them millions of dollars in arms. We've already got people stationed over there. We're over there training the government. Now, here's the thing, and goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the show. The Syrian government is overrun, or not the Syrian, sorry. The Ukrainian government is overrun with neo-Nazis. And we're over there supporting them, training them, and arming them because they're anti-Russian. And so this idea that we're fighting for like democratic ideals and for human rights and freedom around the world, and in Ukraine and in Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya and Somalia and all the other places we're at, it's bogus, because we're over there in Ukraine supporting neo-Nazis and training them and teaching them how to kill people. So it's just totally insane. So, this talk about knocking on the doorstep of Russia, it's not only possible, it's already happening. And so, that's one thing where we got to be real careful. We don't need to be over there prodding governments, especially nuclear-armed governments, and knocking right on their doorstep, just daring them to do something about it. It would be like Russia going in to Mexico and helping to overthrow the government of Mexico to a pro-Russian government, and then militarizing the border and saying anytime if the U.S. tries to come over here and influence anything that's going on, well, you guys are terrorists and you guys are aggressors and you guys are we're gonna shoot at you and bomb you, and then the international community is going to call you guys invaders and stuff like that. That's exactly what we're doing in Ukraine right now. And the entire media kind of paints it as like, oh, these poor Ukrainians are getting oppressed by Russia. We need to go in and liberate them, even though their government is overrun by neo-Nazis. We need to go help them and stuff. It's just the narrative has been so twisted backwards, and the propaganda, it's so effective that a lot of people believe this shit. But, like I said, a lot of people don't even know what's going on. So, in a certain way, that actually works to our benefit, because we can teach people what's actually happening over there. Because you can't really believe much of the narrative that comes out of the mainstream media. I don't want to say I don't believe anything the mainstream media says. You can't say that. But a lot of what the mainstream media does in the United States is it regurgitates government talking points and acts as a de facto state-run media. And that's what the Associated Press, that's the New York Times, the Washington Post, all these extremely, extremely influential media outlets. Now, thankfully, they're only influential mostly to the older crowds, and that's why there's new media outlets like Now This that are trying to masquerade as, millennial centric, like kind of anti-establishment, like we're kind of like friendly to Bernie Sanders, but then in the end, it's like if you go over to now to like their political section, it's like all pro Hillary Clinton stuff, and so they pretended like they were like, oh yeah, Bernie Sanders, and then it was like, oh sorry Bernie Sanders, but Hillary Clinton because Donald Trump is crazy, and it's all this big game, and to me, I don't want to say it's 100% scripted, but I mean, the plan has been out there. Hillary Clinton is going to be the president, and they've been working around this kind of, working plan for a long time, and it's just been so transparent to us and to me that it just makes me, flip my shit whenever I see people believing this stuff. It's just insane. But all that stuff being said, I do got some positive developments today. And this comes on the drug war front because it looks like every state that's got recreational marijuana on the ballot is polling favorably, above 50%. So it looks like there's going to be, let me count the states here. According to the poll, 50% of respondents in Arizona view recreational marijuana legalization favorably, while 60% in California do. 53% of voters in Maine and Massachusetts and about 57% in Nevada also agree that legalizing recreational marijuana in their states would be a positive development. So despite, going back to this propaganda stuff, I mean, they've been doing this drug war nonsense forever now. I mean, how long has the drug war been going on since, well, I guess you can go back to Nixon on that. Again, the horrible shit Nixon did. 40 years. Over 40 years, we've been waging this war against the plant. The plant's winning now. The mighty U.S. empire cannot defeat a plant. So that, it kind of tells you where they're at with defeating terrorism and stuff as well. So it looks like the war on drugs is slowly but surely coming to an end. Now, here's the thing that really needs to be addressed, and we need to look at it from a more philosophical angle. And this is another symptom of the decaying political discussion in the United States. It's, people are starting to favor weed because it doesn't kill people and it's relatively harmless for the most part, and it's just becoming slowly but surely accepted. But people aren't addressing this war on drugs issue from a philosophical standpoint about prohibition and whether drugs at all should be banned, because should people have the right to do with their body what they want, or should they not? People could go drink themselves to death and wreck their car. People can go overdose on prescription drugs. People can go, do all sorts of quote unquote legal things that are very, very harmful. In fact, prescription drugs are responsible for more deaths than illegal drugs now in the United States, much more, in fact. But I think we're selling ourselves short on marijuana legalization by not tying in all the other drugs that should also be legalized, including cocaine, heroin, meth. Now, I'm not an advocate of using meth or heroin, but I'm also a realist that understands that we've been waging a war against meth, heroin, and marijuana for 40 years, and all it's done is gotten stronger. And the industry, the black market, the cartels are stronger than they've ever been. More people are using meth and heroin than they've ever been using.
If you don't understand that what the FDA and the DEA do hand in hand is just protect big pharma, just look at the current now suspended banning of kratom, and basically anything that gets in the way of the opiate pipeline, including the people of Afghanistan, are all collateral damage. That's where it's gotten to be. It's at that insipid, insidious, level.
Yeah, and Jake, I wanted to get your input on this. I don't know if you were planning on writing about it, but there's a bunch of big news about kratom, and so the drug war was about to extend over into this. I guess you call it a herbal remedy or an herbal supplement called kratom or kratom. I don't know how to pronounce it, but the DEA was like, yeah, we're going to come in, we're going to make kratom illegal. We're going to add it basically in with weed and make it all illegal because, waging a war against weed has worked out so well, apparently. But Jake, you wrote a huge article on this about how, banning kratom, having the DEA go and regulate and ban kratom would actually lead to people dying. But I think this also ties into the drug war and all of the abuses going on with the overdoses. Because what's going on with the drug war is that people are getting hooked on opiates, which is heroin is like a form of an opiate, and people get prescribed opiates very easily by their doctors for pain. And when I was a teenager, I got prescribed Vicodin one time when I was which is an opiate for some minor neck pain that I had. And luckily, I didn't get hooked on it or anything. But a lot of people in the United States get prescribed these pills for pain, and then they build kind of a habit out of it. They get addicted to it, and then the doctors take the prescription away, and then they're looking for that fix, and a lot of them turn to heroin. Now, what we were finding out with kratom is that people were using kratom many times to get off of opiates and other addictive drugs. And it was actually saving people's lives and saving people's families and making huge, helping a lot of people. So now the DEA, because they said they were going to ban kratom, there was like this huge public outcry and a bunch of activism and a bunch of media coverage on it. And now they're starting to step back a little bit and say, okay, we're not going to ban it yet. We're going to let, a public comment session. And who knows, they may still try to go through with the ban. But, Jake, how does this all tie into the drug war, man? Do you think that we should start legalizing heroin and meth and cocaine along with weed, or do we just leave it at weed and see how it goes and then try to move up to the next thing after that?
I personally think all drugs should be decriminalized. That's just my personal opinion. But with this particular ban, it's just the irony of it is just so incredible. Here we are dealing with this epidemic of opiate overdoses and just this disaster of overprescribing the drug, and here we have a solution to it, a completely safe solution to it that's killed no one, and they're gonna try and ban it. It was just so on its face, so absurd that I think when so many people raised hell about it, and so many different testimonials came in of people who were like, I need this, I need this to help with the pain. I don't know if the government has the cultural bandwidth to withstand another criminalization of an herb. They're already in so much shit. No one will ever trust the government again, ever, in the United States, for about 100 different reasons. But if nothing else, the war on drugs has been such an absolute domestic war crime. I don't know any other way to put it than it's a domestic war crime that people are sitting in prison right now, rotting away for growing a harmless plant that helps people. There's just no other way to look at it. And yeah, I think they basically hit a paywall or something where they're like, at some point, they're just going to push people over the edge. And I think we're getting closer and closer to that, where enough people are going to just be so pissed off and horrified by what the government has become that people are just going to start rebelling on a mass level. And when that happens, there's no amount of cops that can help at that point, because once you've lost that critical middle ground of people that are like, all right, let's keep the machine moving. Once you piss off enough people, it's just, you've gone too far. And I predicted it actually to my friend last week. I said, I have a feeling that they're going to at least pause it for a little while, because there have just been so many petitions and people really mobilized for this one. There is some hardcore petitioning and activism on this. So, I think this is a good example of how in the new age of social media, it's going to be harder for them to pull off shit like that. That said, they could still do it, and the law is the law.
What you said, Jake, was horrifying, in that nobody will ever trust the government ever again in the U.S., which means that right now, as we sit here talking, they're backed into a corner, and they're desperate, and they're wounded, and they know they'll die if they don't kill the attacker, and the attacker is the people now.
Right.
You know, so you know what I mean? Where do we go from here? I see
the citizens are enemy combatants. You can find that in literature from the Iraq War and how they were preparing for that, which is that our own citizens are now the enemies. And yeah, I mean, I don't know how we come back from that, but
I don't think the civilian population is going to really make it through what's coming really anyway. I hate to say it, but we do have something like 14 million vets, so we have a fighting chance. But what I see happening if they don't get their war with Russia is we're going to have a guerrilla war and a civil war 2.0. And,
right.
The government's not going to destroy their own infrastructure, but they'll definitely come down heavy-handed with the UN and whoever's willing from the police state. But yeah, Nick, every time it comes bouncing back, the military fights each other, and then the vets and the people have to rise against private armies. We'll see what happens.
Well, it's back to what you guys were saying about the people becoming the enemy combatants. I mean, that's pretty obvious, judging by the amount of police militarization that's gone on since the Iraq War and all the MRAPs and just military-grade equipment. I mean, these guys are equipped with grenade launchers now, dude. I mean, this is just ridiculous. But even more obvious was, there were some great memes about this, and I think even Ron Paul talked about this, was how, they're trying to charge Edward Snowden with espionage, which is, or treason, which is basically helping the enemy. When really all Edward Snowden did was reveal to the American people that our government was spying on us in a massive way. And so if they're going to charge Snowden with treason, well, then that means that the American people are the enemy because he was only informing us. And so that is a fair point. I think that they probably do view us in that way in some aspects. I think there's still a bunch of good elements within the government. I think there are good politicians in there. But I think the machine that has taken over, the deep state, the empire, the money factory, really, that has become the government, is just so strong and overwhelming. And like Jake was saying, it's like overwhelmed with groupthink, where even the good guys get hammered down. I mean, look at Bernie Sanders now. For his whole career, he was kind of that one guy that would stand up and say, no, this isn't right, and vote against the bill. And look at him now. He's over here towing the line for Hillary Clinton. He's battered down like a poor old, man that's war-torn or something. He's not the same Bernie Sanders that we were seeing at the beginning of the campaign there. And he's just not the same guy anymore. And he's been worn down by the machine, and it really got to him. I don't want to say that it was any kind of overt or covert threat to him, which is, the rumors have circulated, yet to be confirmed, but you could just tell that he's been worn down and beaten down by the machine, even though he stood there his whole career and kind of fought, for what he thought was right. But I think that it's just this overwhelming groupthink that is that kind of controls the government. And, I think some people are kind of just victimized by it. I think there are decent politicians that get elected, like, I don't want to say any specific examples because I know there's going to be detractors.
Amash
is, like Amash. There are good examples in there, man. But, on the other hand, you got Hillary Clinton, which is kind of one of the ringleaders. And you got Donald Trump, on the other hand, which is the financier. He's the corporate capitalist state. It needs the financiers and it needs the people like Clinton to pull the trigger and to, execute what the billionaire class wants done. Trump is the billionaire class. Clinton is the executor of what the billionaire class wants. Either side of the
I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo.
JJ